All right, we are live. Okay, perfect. So let me just share this quickly before we start. A lot going on today, especially because it's the Lionsgate portal. So a lot of crazy stuff going on. But it's going to be a very wonderful, mystical, and magical day. That's for sure. The cool thing is, too, in case anybody's interested, before we begin, I just released a new music video and single, which is a song dedicated to Hitomi Shimatani as a response to Mystic World. You can check it out on my channel. Please and share it. It would really be appreciated. I know she really likes it, and it's a special song dedicated, especially for her because she's so wonderful and sweet. And well, I love her more than anybody else. Why beat around the bush, right? Even all my Japanese friends and fans and supporters agreed upon that. Like they heard the song and they understood right away that my feelings were very true. All right, got this done. And then I'll also share on Twitter quickly before we begin. Also, I'm going to start the third season of live Clo card readings this evening. So if anybody's interested, definitely tune in at 8 p.m. Eastern time if you want to have your fortune told. We will get back into that and also discuss more of like the single and plans for the future and what's good. So yeah, you definitely don't want to miss it if you've been a fan of the show so far. And hold on. All right, share that. Oh, let's see what Chihara, my friend, say. Oh, she wants to make everybody smile. I'm gonna translate this to Japanese. Oh my god, it's probably better if I say that into Japanese. Sorry for the delay. Like I said, we will get into it soon. I usually end up trying to keep it about an hour. In the case of Impulse, it's a 18 track album, so it took a little longer. Plus, there was so much to talk about, being the first album. With Final Requiem, it's an 18 track album as well, so I'll try not to overkill it in that case, too. Excuse me. Sumimasen. But yeah, it should be very wonderful though to talk about this album because this was a very unique record in many regards, just because it goes back to a lot of my roots. Like when I first started making music in high school, there's references to that. There's also the idea of incorporating more jazz into the music, which is very cool. So, okay, we shared all that. Okay, now we can get right into it. So, yeah, as I was saying, like, yeah, with Final Requiem, my fourth album, it really becomes a lot more expansive. It's a lot more unique. It was the end of some things. It was the end of my relationship with Haruna. That's why the intro track was called Haruna's Final Poem, because when she originally recorded that, we were still together. That's why she does appear doing part of the intro on SOS. But unfortunately, that was like the last time she ever recorded anything for me. And that ended up being like the end of like our relationship. So the Final Requiem thing starting to change. Actually, it's funny because I was talking about Chihara Minori just now. Final Requiem was heavily inspired by Chihara Minori. I'll show you just in case the audience isn't sure who I'm talking about. Chihara Minori, Sanctuary Greatest Hits. all really good songs. Final Moratorium was a song that I heard and loved, and I discovered it by accident, I think. But then I just got right into her music, and then I think it's because I was listening to a song that she did for the disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya soundtrack, like the movie. I was listening to the soundtrack of that, and yeah, like I really liked that song, and then it led to other songs of hers. Obviously, it's just kind of playing at random. And then as soon as I heard "Final Moratorium," I just fell in love with that song. Like the video, everything. I was like, "Oh my god, that's so hype!" And she's so sweet. That's why I always say, like, she's my best friend. She's always hearting my comments, hearting my Twitter post, and that's what I was reading. Like she takes her time to read everybody's message because she wants to make everybody smile and make the world a happier place. And I just think that's beautiful because I'm like, you know what? That's why I had to comment. I'm like, don't worry, keep up the good work, my dear friend. You always make me happy and make me smile with your music and with your vlog videos and everything. It's all wonderful. So, but yeah, that's actually where it came from, because the idea of a requiem is like a dream that's kind of like the aftermath result of a certain incident. So the final requiem, like after this part of the dream, this sort of stage of the journey, which it was the end of my relationship with Haruna, it was kind of a stillness, which reminded me of the idea of moratorium. But it was more of, okay, well, where's the dream going to go from here? Which is why I titled it Requiem, Final Requiem. So that was kind of the idea behind the concept of that. It was the last time I would actually work with producer DMAC, who did mixing for several of the songs that I mastered on this record. Tone Jones did instrumentation, and I also did a good chunk of the instrumentation for this record myself. As we go along, I will explain like how each track came about, who did what on it, and how it like started to really evolve into a lot of my own production, a lot of my own sound, and a lot more original ideas. But yeah, as I said, this was actually the last time I would work with producer DMAC. We kind of completed our contract. I basically split some of the songs that he did for Mahjong Titan. I used a certain amount of them for Mahjong Titan, and then I had a few left over. So I basically took those because they were really good songs, and I basically added more new songs to kind of round it off and expand on the idea. Now, I was inspired by many different things when I was doing this, like the Yakuza, a movie that had Ken Takakura and Robert Mitchum in it, was a big inspiration. Black Rain, which had Michael Douglas, Andy Garcia, Ken Takakura, Yusaku Matsuda, and Tomisaburo Wakayama, who was also the main star of the Lone Wolf and Cub film series. So there was a lot of references to that. And there were references to the Lone Wolf and Cub series, even on Impulse, because I've always loved those movies. Sadly, my friend Tony took a few of those movies and he never gave them back. I try to let that go and forgive him and send love and light and gratitude and all that, but it's hard because I really love those movies, and they were a gift to me from an ex-girlfriend too. So you can't really replace the sentimental value of that, right? But yeah, with this album, starting off with the first track, which I mentioned was called Haruna's Final Poem. She did like the spoken word, and it's got like more of a Twin Peaks kind of vibe to it too, again, like the last record, sort of continuing that trend. I really got into Twin Peaks and a lot of David Lynch work around this period of time too. And that has a instrumental produced by me. DMAC did do the mixing for that. I mastered it. And that starts the album off, sort of building the atmosphere and continuing sort of like the theme of the end of Mahjong Titan, where there was the idea of seeing you in the sycamore trees, right? So we continue that with the intro, like sort of like where we left off, there was sycamore trees. We went into a whole nother realm. And then it leads into Return of 12 Gauge, which people that were fans of me back when I was in high school kind of wondered why I changed the name 12 Gauge. There's actually another rapper who already has that name. It's spelled slightly differently than how originally I used it, but like the idea of it, they wanted me to stick with that, but I wasn't really a gangster rapper, so it didn't suit me. My music's more of old school hip hop, like Rakim, Big Daddy Kane kind of stuff, with Japanese pop and jazz, and even a bit of rock and blues and stuff in it, right? So the idea just didn't stick, but they wanted 12 gauge back. They're like, you got to make songs like back in the 12 gauge day. And I'm like, so I thought hypothetically, I imagined the scenario like to the best possible extent. I was like, well, what would it be like if 12 gauge came back? At least for one like sort of song, like back to the 12 gauge era, right? Like what would it be like? So I really put myself in those shoes, and that led to the idea of the return of 12 gauge. The instrumental was done by Tone Jones. It was one I bought later. The mixing and mastering was Kamar. Kira L did backup vocals for some of the parts in the emphasis just to kind of give it more hype. But yeah, it was a wild sort of song because I was referencing a lot of different things. Like I started getting into a lot of Chisato Moritaka, and I thought, wow, for being in her 50s, like she's really like beautiful still. Like she looks like she could be in her 20s, like a fine wine. She got better with time, right? So I even made a joke about that in the end of one of the verses too. And I used the idea of like traveling to other places in the past and the places that I wanted to go. And I was sort of referencing like, okay, what if 12 gauge came out of the grave and came back to rap for a song, right? Like what would it be like based on the improvement of skill and all the knowledge and lessons that I've learned as Super Kami Guru Alucard? So because people like older fans since back in high school, they really liked They Call Me 12 gauge, which I was just trying to tie the story of that was where it started. So they kept bugging me, make more like 12 gauge kind of songs. So I was like, okay, fine. I'll come back for a song. 12 gauge will resurrect for a song, that character. So that became the return of 12 gauge. And it's got a very eerie, apocalyptic kind of beat to it, which that was probably because I was watching the movie Virus Fukasu no Hi a lot. I talked about this a lot in the last episode because it was mentioned too in Mahjong Titan. But that's where the atmosphere of like this really darker vibe, like there were a lot of darker moments throughout Final Requiem, but it had like a very bluesy, jazzy kind of sound, right? And this is when I really started to experiment with jazz. And then, yeah, the next track leads into Keep the Dream Alive, which is like a positive, upbeat song. Tone Jones did the chorus and the beat for that, like sort of scratching and sampling. And it had a really upbeat vibe, which honestly kind of reminded me, maybe it's just me, but it gave me like that vibe and that feeling of the music that you hear in Gerudo Valley when you play Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Maybe that's just me, but I really love that, right? So it was very upbeat and hype, but I like that. It's kind of a faster beat. So I got retrospect on it because it was the idea of, okay, we still got to keep making good music. We got to keep this dream alive, like not give up. We've come this far. Let's keep going, right? And then because I was still very into the Twin Peaks sort of vibe, that's why I got my Russian friend Elizaveta, the humanoid interface, to do the outro to that. And she actually references the dialogue that Leland Palmer says when he's like swerving on the road out in the country and he's all possessed by Bob and crazy, right? So because there's that like video footage, because the video was very cool to make, me in retrospect actually drove around several times in his car, and I got different footage on different days, and then I ended up sort of compiling it together. But we got shots of out in the country, driving just around Hamilton and in Hamilton, up the mountain, things like that. And even footage of him and me in the studio and me in my room and all these things. And we kind of just combined them together to make the video for Keep the Dream Alive. But yeah, no, that's what's crazy is because when she's doing her dialogue at the end, it's got like just driving out in the country, like the camera looks kind of wild, things are moving fast at some points, like swerving with the fringe on top, right? So we really captured that vibe very well, I think, with Keep the Dream Alive, especially the video. It was a lot of fun to me. And retrospect, he was nervous about his verse on that song. And maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just my personal opinion. But if he was watching this and he actually wanted my honest opinion, I felt like that was one of the best, most solid verses he ever dropped. I wrote the lyrics for it, and he was nervous about like the tone of his voice, and he was a bit on edge when he was rapping it because he was nervous. It was a fast beat. He wanted to do a good job. You want my honest opinion, though? I think he killed it. I think he nailed it. I think under that pressure, it pushed him to be that much more on beat and more on cue. And he was nervous about it, but I could honestly tell you, like that, All I Want, and the Gymnopedy trilogy, he did great on all those songs. And that's why he keeps coming back, making more new songs. He's going to be on the new album, A Point to Prove, by the way. We have discussed the ideas for him being on a new song. So keep an eye out for that. And then, yeah, from Keep the Dream Alive, which sort of brings back a little more positive yin yang balance, because it's like the intro's kind of weird, a mix of positive and negative and mysterious, even, right? And then Return of 12 Gauge gets really dark. So we had to like bring the vibe up with Keep the Dream Alive, add some positivity back to it, right? Especially because the next song, Fort Erie Blues, was really jazzy. And it was based on a song that Billie Holiday sang in the movie New Orleans with Louis Armstrong. And do you know what it means to miss New Orleans? And I thought it reminded me, like hearing that song made me want to do like my own spin on that, about reminiscing on back when I lived in Fort Erie, especially because the last album had the cover from Fort Erie and, you know, just kind of the nostalgic times. And then I also played saxophone on it. I just really sang it like a blues song, like the way Billy would sing it. And I really like that about the song because it kind of adds more of a dimension that you're not expecting. It was the first time on like one of my professional released albums, the Super Kami Guru Alucard, where I just fully sang the song. But it's got a very mellow, jazzy, blues kind of vibe. I really like that about the song. And yeah, a lot of sort of nostalgia and the vibe of like, you know, thinking back to more lighthearted and simpler times. And then, of course, after that track, because it was kind of a shorter track, but, you know, it was good to make. I think it added sort of like a lighthearted, nostalgic moment to the record. It leads into the track Black Rain, which, as I mentioned, Black Rain, the movie with Michael Douglas, Ken Takakura, was a very big influence on me. I really love that movie. Ridley Scott did a fantastic job with that movie. In fact, I honestly think that was one of the best movies he ever made. One of them, at least. I'm not knocking his other movies, but Black Rain was really special. So yeah, I made this song, and it was based on the ideas that they discussed about the Black Rain, like about America dropping like the atomic bombs, and it made the rain black. It kind of corrupted like some of Japanese society. It forced the Yakuza to no longer be like more of a noble, honorable like order, like back in the days of samurai, right? They had to resort to crime, like extortion. Their whole system changed as a result of America shoving its values down their throat, and that wasn't good. And it was, you made the rain black, so now I gotta pay you back. Like, and I'm not proud of that because I have American heritage, and I'm actually ashamed that America did that, because this is my own personal opinion. But you look at this historically, Japan only attacked Pearl Harbor to cut off arms being dealt to the Chinese and the Nazis and all that, because that's where they were getting shipped from. They were also getting shipped to Europe to help the Nazis, but they were getting shipped to China, and China was fighting Japan. So their strategy with that was, we attack Pearl Harbor. They don't have a way to give the Chinese any more weapons because the Chinese were attacking them. America was claiming to be neutral, but they're basically giving weapons to the enemy of Japan. So that's why they looked at it. They attacked Pearl Harbor as a military strategy. They figured, we wipe that base out, then they don't have a way to give China any more weapons. What America did was just pure savage cruelty, because you look at it, if they really wanted to wipe out all of Japan's military strength, they could have dropped one bomb on Tokyo-based military base, and it would have wiped it all out. Wouldn't have had to resort to killing innocent civilians, casualties, all that. They dropped it on innocent farmland. Hiroshima and Nagasaki didn't have any military like there. It was farmland. It was innocent civilians. So it was just kind of like a dick move, like kicking Japan in the balls when they were already down. And they were 3 days away from surrendering anyway. That's what a lot of people neglect, that fact. So America was just being a dick. And yes, I have a right to say it. It's my own opinion, but I have a right to say it. And I'm not even being racist towards the Americans because my father was American. So don't think I'm like, anti-American or anything either. I'm just saying in that case, it's a very shameful part of America's history. But hey, America has lots of shameful history. Am I right? Look at slavery. Look at all the other horrible things America did. Not saying I have anything or hate Americans or anything, not at all. But as somebody who has an American father, I'm not really proud of those parts of that history in my background, we'll say. And that's one of them. I don't like that. Hence why I made Black Rain, because I was appalled by that. I agreed with the Japanese being outraged and angered by that. I love Japanese culture. Most of my fans are Japanese, so I really didn't like that. So that was the idea of putting that emotion into the song. We used the chorus referencing lines from the movie. I rapped a verse. Then I used two of my alter egos, Vlad the Impaler and Little Buckingham, to rap verses, which I'll put it this way. I showed my friend Reiko this song before it was even released, and she was like, wow, this song's like so powerful and crazy. Like, this is one of the most like dynamic and incredible songs you ever made. Like, she was just blown away from it right away. And then there's the one part where the producer Daybreak, because he did the mixing and the mastering, the beat was Tone Jones, and like with 40 Erie Blues, I did all that instrumentation, mixing, mastering all myself. So that was my own original, like completely my own. The first track I did that for too, really. But yeah, with Black Rain, Tone Jones did the beat, Daybreak did the mixing and the mastering, and he also did backup vocals when we're doing the bridge, where it's like Nani Desuka, Nani Desuka, hey, Nani Desuka, which is like, what is it? What is it? What is it? Hey, what is it? What is it? What is it? Hey. So he came up with the idea as we were doing it. He's like, yo, that's hype, man. You should add like some, hey, in the background. So I was like, okay. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to do some vocals on this too. He's like, I never get to do vocals on your songs. He's like, I'm going to just throw some vocals on this too. Hey, hey. So Daybreak actually did some backup vocals on that, which was very cool. And yeah, the lyrics of those verses too was like all about the ideas of Black Rain and Twin Peaks and sort of the dark vibe. So we go back into like the dark end of the spectrum with Black Rain on that record. And then after Black Rain, it goes into Tribute for Strange Fruit. So it doesn't get lighter after that. It actually goes into an even darker concept, which I guess this album really reflects the dark nature of America's history, which I'm not proud of having part American in my blood, right? Because the idea of Tribute for Strange Fruit, it's a dedication to like Billie Holiday's song Strange Fruit, which is really the idea of like she tried to fight against racism and oppression and segregation and all that with this really powerful song, which was the first protest song in history. And she was attacked by the American government, the narcotics office. All this stuff happened to her because she was trying to stand up for what was right. And I love Billie Holiday. I actually have her autograph. I will show you people this too, since we're talking about this, just so you could tell. I'm a really big Billie Holiday fan, actually. So yeah, as you could see, Billie Holiday's autograph. And yeah, I was like so torn apart to know what she suffered, because she was honestly one of the greatest jazz singers ever, because she could sing without any sort of classical training or understanding of notes, just from feeling, and she could improvise to any sort of melody and always do it so perfectly, like better than anybody else could do it in many cases, because she just got into the zone of, okay, I should sing it like this because that's how it feels to sing about that. And that's what made Strange Fruit such a powerful, moving song. So, you know, knowing what she went through, knowing what she sacrificed for that song, and her being one of my favorite songs, I felt like she should have like a tribute, like, you know, Billie, as a white person, I love what you did, and I think you were brave, and I salute you, applaud you, and congratulate you. Like, despite all the stuff you went through, you really were brave and strong to put that out there. And I agree, you were right to challenge that. Not everybody was racist. It's just who was white too, kind of show the lighter side in that regard. So that song is sort of divided in three parts because there's the first part where I talk about wanting to go to Japan, leave this North American society behind because they're a lot more like nice, polite, honorable, and kind over there. There's less racism actually. And I've heard stories of black people going over there and they're treated like royalty. So it's a lot different than here in North America, right? So that was the idea of wanting to go to Japan. And the first one, leave this North American society. The second part is like the rap where it like says like, Billy, I love you. I think you're great. And I'm sorry for everything you went through. But you did make a difference. You did help change the world by fighting against that oppression and racism and segregation. And then the third part goes into like this beautiful jazzy sort of melody where I'm saying like, because her favorite tenor sax player was her best friend Lester Young, and she used to always be so happy when he was playing the tenor saxophone. So that's what inspired me to pick up the tenor saxophone, and this album was the first time playing the tenor saxophone, hence why I showed that off on 40 Erie Blues. And with this, I jammed out the whole third act of Tribute for Strange Fruit, playing the saxophone as sort of like, I know you always loved hearing Lester played the tenor saxophone, and people have actually praised me, saying that my style of playing the tenor saxophone is like a mix of Louis Jordan and Lester Young, which I take as a really big compliment. In fact, my guitar player in the SOS Brigade Quartet could actually hear the influence listening to Lester that, yeah, you definitely play like him. So I jam that out as sort of like, I know I'm not Lester, but I will play like Lester because I know Lester playing always made you happy. And that's why it really is a dedicated tribute to her. And that's where the idea of Tribute for Strange Fruit came out. And then it leads into Can't Deny, featuring Tone Jones co-producer for the instrumental, Be Done. He co-produced it with Tone Jones, who did a lot of my other beats. Tribute for Strange Fruit was all my instrumentation, except for the third part. The third part was done by Tone Jones. The third act, we'll call it, of Tribute for Strange Fruit, because it's like a trilogy sort of song, right? The third act was produced by Tone Jones. The first two acts were myself. I did the mixing and the mastering for that one myself. Whereas Can't Deny, that was mixed by D-Mac, recorded with D-Mac, and I mastered it. And yeah, Be Done, the co-producer with Tone Jones, sings the chorus. And then I rap the verse, sort of like an upbeat, more positive, in the club. I can't deny how I feel. Like I'm feeling good. I'm in love. I'm thinking, oh, it's wonderful. It reminded me of like when they're in the Japanese clubs in the movie Black Rain. That's what sort of the nostalgia of that idea came to mind. Like the neon lights in the clubs, thinking about the woman I love. Everything's good. By the way, got my Baby Metal shirt on today. I actually ripped it at the back, which means I'm going to have to retire wearing it and just keep it as a souvenir. But I'm like, oh, I'm sad about that, but I'll wear it one last time, at least for this video, so I can have a memory with it, right? But yeah, as I was saying, like, that was inspired too because in the bridge of the song where I do sing a bit, I used more Takako Mamiya lyrics, which I referenced her on almost all of my albums. And that's why I said the producer D-Mac, he even kept the CD of Love Trip that I burned for him because he really liked her music as well. And that was a reference to some of the lyrics that she sang in Mayonaka no Joke, which is Midnight Joke. And the verses are about like Ayane and Haruna. Like, you know, I was most in love when I was with my Japanese exes, and I do reflect on other exes before them, but I wasn't as happy. So I can't deny that the way I feel tonight, because I was still with Haruna when I made this song, that it was the best sort of feeling. It was like being in a club as a successful artist, jamming out, everything's all good, living the highlight. It reminded me of being in like one of those neon light clubs in Japan. So it was just great in that sense. And B Dunn's R&B chorus really complements the song. As simple as it is, it's very laid back, it's mellow, but it gives it a really nice feel. And that's where the album really starts to pick up and become more atmospheric, we'll say, at that point, right? And then from there, after Can't Deny, it leads into this skit, the rant skit, we called it, which I did the instrumental for. I mastered it. D-Mac did the mixing for this. But when I sent him the instrumental and the vocals for it, he laughed so hard. He literally emailed me to be like, I've never laughed that hard listening to any sort of audio file. But like, it's so funny the way you do this rant skit, because like, you don't even seem that angry. Like, you seem kind of angry, but what you're saying is so funny. It's like Richard Pryor kind of humor. Like, you use the anger to make it like really funny, right? And he's like, I've never laughed so hard as I did when I just first listened to just the audio of you like ranting. And he's like, it was kind of hard to be scared or intimidated by it, because even though the music was dark, it was scary. The instrumentation I did for it, right? He said, it's just so funny the way you go off about things and the analogies and the metaphors you use and just the way you phrase things. And then you'll just totally turn it to like something positive about coffee and all this stuff. And they better wash their hands and all this, which was references to Twin Peaks, right? And he said, I've never laughed so hard in my life as I did listening to that rant of yours. So I was like, oh, that's good then, because it was supposed to be kind of like intense, scary, like Twin Peaks, but also like comical at the same time. That's what I was going for, right? And that was another thing, like the therapy freestyle, which I did for Munch on Titan. I was just pissed off one day and I just hit record and just started going off about shit. And then after, I was like, oh my God, that's so funny. Like the dialogue, I'm like, it's scary, it's intense in some ways, but it's more funny than anything, even though I was angry, right? I was like, you know what? I should use that just for kicks, right? And that became the rant skit. So yeah, like sort of like, especially because he said it was more funny than scary. I guess it's sort of like a comedic break in between the tension of the album, especially because the next song gets a little more intense, a lot more intense, but it's got like a positive, happy ending to it too. But the next song it leads into, because now we'd be reaching the halfway point of the album, is the track Still Holding On, which was inspired by Greg Allman's song I'll Be Holding On from the Black Rain soundtrack. And I really liked the way he said it, the message of it. I kind of wanted to make it my own and sort of add my own spin on it. So that's what the verses were primarily about, especially the first and the third verse, which my alter ego Denine raps. And then the middle verse was actually such a challenge for me, but I was very excited to do that verse. I was so proud of that song because I actually mixed 7 different languages into that verse. Like, there is actually to count out the languages, just so you know exactly, because if you were to listen to that, it's not all English, it's not all Japanese. You might be lost at what I'm saying in a very easy way, because it's not one consistent language or a mix of 2. There's 7 different languages in that second verse of Still Holding On, like a very wide variety of cultures and languages, polylingual, we'll say. So yeah, there's English, a bit of English, there's French, Spanish, Japanese, Norwegian, Romanian, Vietnamese, and actually 8. I'm miscounting, because there was also one phrase of Tagalog, which is like the Filipino language. So yeah, that's why that middle verse and Still Holding On is so complex. But I'm like, you'd have to be a genius and know all 8 of these languages to know exactly what I'm saying. I know what I'm saying because I know what all those things mean, but the average person wouldn't. But the idea was, I'm in a league of my own. I'm Super Kami Guru Alucard. I'm above all these other rappers because I could spit a verse that only I would understand, even though it's accurate. Everything I'm saying is right for the languages I'm speaking, but you would have to know all 8 of those languages to know everything I'm saying, and that shows like I'm a league above the rest. Hence Super Kami Guru Alucard, right? And that was the really cool, intense concept of that. Denine's verse was very intense and gritty and to the point. My first verse was just generally focusing on the idea of holding on no matter what. And that's why that second verse was just the chance for me to let loose and really show, hey, if I was rapping polylingual, nobody could keep up with me. No rapper could rap in that many languages and throw them all into a verse and make it make sense. So it was like, sort of like proven just how good I was, not only with lyrical abilities and my rhyming capacity, but my ability to do it in a polylingual form. And then after Denine's verse, I had my one Japanese friend, Atsuko, which we called Aiko-chan. That was what she wanted to be called. She studied in America, so she knew English very good. And we had talked about it, and I said, I want you on a song. Like, I have a lot of my Japanese friends on songs with this record. Come on a song with me, right? And she was shy. At first, she didn't know if, like, it was okay to do it or whatever. But I was like, well, you said you'd do it. Like, come on. As my friend, I'd want you to do it. I guess it was her husband might have been a bit nervous, thinking like I was trying to flirt with her. But I did eventually explain to her, like, because I was dating Haruna when I still made the song, right? I do have a girlfriend. Like, it's not like that. It's just you said that to me, and it was very moving and inspiring, and it related to the song. So I just want you to record what you said to me, what you typed. Record that, and I'll put that at the end of the song because it was very nice. It inspired me. I really liked it. So she's like, okay. I'll just explain to my husband, no, you already have a girlfriend. You just want me to say this because as a friend, I said these words to you and it inspired you. So she ended up recording it, fulfilled her promise. Sounded really nice because that was based on a real situation. She really said that to me. It inspired me, motivated me, encouraged me. So it's like reality in the art is reflecting real life, right? And then the outro, the very last part of the song, which goes on without any musical audio, because the beat was another one, instrumental wise, done by Tone Jones, mixed and mastered by Daybreak. But yeah, at the end, the famous actress Stacey Dash, who she actually wished me happy birthday last year, and she's been a very positive, encouraging supporter. I'm really grateful for her friendship and positive encouragement. I've got videos where she's actually saying things to me on my channel. In fact, what she says at the end of Still Holding On is its own separate video. But I took the audio of that and put it at the end of it because it was so inspiring and moving too. And it was the idea of focus on the inspiration, the empowerment, the encouragement, and the support, and keep going from that. And that will give you the strength to still keep holding on, right? So what she says in the end of that was, don't worry about the barriers, the obstacles, the illusions. They're just stepping stones. You just got to keep persistent, holding on, and focus on your dreams, and don't give up on it because it's God's purpose for you. So yeah, that overall is what made the song such a beautiful, moving, empowering song in many ways. I really like that. Plus, I sang with some auto-tune. It sounded really nice, reflecting sort of the Greg Allman vibe from the Black Raid soundtrack once again. And yeah, I'm really happy with that one and how it turned out. The next track was an idea for a song that I had for such a long time. And I didn't have this beat when I came up with this idea, but I heard it on Tone Jones' site because he produced it, right? And I was like, oh, if I ever made a song to this beat, I could call it Guardian of Earth because it has this really light, free, feeling high sort of vibe. Like you're not high on drugs, but like up in the sky. Like it reminded me of like Kami's Lookout in Dragon Ball Z, right? And since I'm Super Kami Guru Alucard, I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm the guardian of Earth, right? So I was like, oh, yeah, if I was the guardian of Earth, I'd make a song like that. It would sound really smooth, positive, carefree, above all things. And my friend Yukiko Goto did the opening intro. That's why I referenced her in the song, because we had karaoke together. And I was like, I got to get you on a song too, Yukiko, because my other friend Haruka was going to do a song with me. Haruna, who was in the karaoke party, did the intro and then vocals on SOS. So I was like, oh, I got to get you on a song too, Yukiko. You're a very dear friend of mine, right? So she did the arigato part. And that's why I was like, oh, well, I got to rap about her. That's why I actually talk about the karaoke party in the song. Now, oddly enough, the cool thing about that song is I actually quoted and sang for the bridge some lyrics that were a reflection of a Billie Holiday song called They Can't Take That Away From Me. The chorus, like I said, the main chorus was the idea of being on top of the world, being like the guardian of Earth, being like Kami in Dragon Ball Z, overlooking everything. And the verses too had a lot of ideas of David Lynch and Eric Satie, that eccentric vibe. The idea of, karaoke parties in Japan was a big part of it. And then the Someday in the Rain was a reference to a line that Retrospect said in All I Want. And it's also based on an episode of The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. The final episode of the show was called Someday in the Rain. So that's why I kept referencing it, because I was very fascinated with that episode and that idea of it, right? So someday in the rain, someday in the rain, someday in the rain. So yeah, basically that song has 3 verses because it's almost like it's 2 parts, that song, in one. Like you would look at it as the first part would be Guardian of Earth, and the second part of that song would be Someday in the Rain. Now, I didn't end up specifying this in the actual record, but if you wanted to know how I looked at the song personally, I looked at it as 2 songs in one. The first part is Yukiko saying arigato, me doing the chorus, the first verse, the chorus, the second verse, then the chorus and the third verse. And then when it breaks off into that someday in the rain, someday in the rain, someday in the rain, someday in the rain, then it kind of turns into a shorter second part of the song where the beat shifts. It gets kind of more wild and crazy. And then there's just one verse, and then it ends right on the final verse. Rain and terror like bang rains. Which reminded me of, like, because he was in the movie The People Under the Stairs by Wes Craven, right? And also the remake of Dawn of the Dead. So that's where the idea came from that. And also in Pulp Fiction, he plays a mob boss. So that's why Rain and Terror like Bing Rains. And then it ends right like that, because it's like it completely shifts into a new song, and it's just someday in the rain. It rains. Rains either like precipitates or rains like rules over, right? So it's kind of a play on the word in many different ways. And that's overall the idea behind Guardian of Earth. Next, we get into the jazzy interlude, which is sort of like a reflection thinking back. Now, Guardian of Earth was produced by Tone Jones. Daybreak did the mixing and the mastering. With the jazzy interlude, I actually did the saxophone on that. And then the piano was actually a piano friend of mine playing a rendition of Eric Satie's Gymnopédie #1 as like the background instrumentation. And then D-Mac did the mixing, I did the mastering. But what's great about that is you have sort of a glimpse of the past. It's like you go back right to the beginning, right before Impulse was even completed. You get a glimpse of it all over again because you hear the dialogue that me and Ayane had with each other back when we were still most close. So it's like she makes one final appearance, like everything kind of comes full circle from back to the beginning. And then I got Rain from Lolita Dark, who is Reiko's husband, and he's like their producer. He plays some instruments and stuff. He did like a rapping chorus that we ended up using because it had the idea of like David Lynch getting reference into the lyrics, right? So we used that as like a chorus on the jazzy interlude. And it was cool that he did that because it's like a preview of like, because you get a glimpse of the past and you're also getting a foreshadowing of the future. Like time is all existent at once in that song because you get the past and the future all merging together in sort of like this state of the present, which is the saxophone solo. It's like all time unites because time all existed now. It's just an illusion, but everything exists in the now, right? But that's what it is. The foreshadowing that Rain is going to rap on the album is the idea of his chorus being there before it concludes with the saxophone solo backing up the arrangement of Eric Satie's Gymnopédie. And yeah, it's very beautiful. It's very moving because you get a glimpse of me talking to Ayane. Totomo kawaii, Ayane-chan. Wee! Which was a reference to Card Captor Sakura because we watched Clear Card together, and Sakura always would like what it was like, whoa, wee, right? So she did that on Impulse, so it was bringing it back to like the days of Impulse, and that was the idea of like we always looked at our relationship when we were together as I was like Shaoran because I was the foreigner and she was Sakura, and she was very cute like Sakura. So it was very similar in that sense. And even thinking about that, I'm like, oh man, even though things ended horribly, I was very happy with her, and I think a part of me would always love her more than a lot of my other relationships, which is why I made that song to reflect that was the beauty of the past that never saw the light of day, right? And then yeah, Rain's chorus kind of gives you that hype upbeat of the tension about to come forward in the album. So it's like all time existing in the now, and that became the jazzy interlude. And that leads into the next track, which is a purely jazzy instrumentation piece, a little Norwegian dialogue in the aspect. Because I got inspired to learn Norwegian because I was like, man, I don't know any Norwegian people. I've never met Norwegian people. And they talked about Norwegians in Twin Peaks. I was like, I got to learn some. So I actually did learn a bit of Norwegian. And then that's why I speak it with this kind of upbeat, rocky instrumental. And then it goes into this sax riff for a while. I'm just jamming out with the sax, which is really cool because it's a song that really would be divided into three parts, but in different ways. Like there's the rocky, we'll call the first part Norwegian rock. uh, and then the second part would be jazzy sax jamming, and then the third part would be straight bars because it's just lyrics, right? And I'm rapping like it was like a freestyle. I freestyled this, and it was supposed to be used on another song, but the producer who was making the song split the like lyrics in half and screwed it up, and it didn't sound good at all. So I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna take my verse and use it for another song because it's good. It was good for a freestyle, but it's like he kind of like butchered it, chopping it in half because everything of the rhyme made more sense when it was as a whole 16 bar freestyle piece. So that became straight bars, the third act of Time for a Change, which you think about it, you break down the title, time for like the time is in like 4/4, like 4 bars for 4 bars, and then a change because there's changes that go into A. I'm playing in the key of A, and then when I start rapping, I'm using a lot of A sounds. So it's a change, time for a change. So there's a lot of cleverness behind the idea of that. And then it leads into the next track where I was imagining because I was watching Black Rain with my friend OG Loke Dog, who ends up on Welcome to Japan, the 13th track, the next one. And we were watching Black Rain together, and we really liked the dialogue and the way he said certain things. I was like, yo, I should get OG Loke Dog rapping this. Like, this would be good. It would be funny if he said this as a rap, right? Now, I didn't have a beat, and we were forced to record it here. So I did all the mixing and mastering myself and the instrumentation with this one. I used saxophone at the end. I did a little rapping in between his little bit. And we're only rapping like almost like conversational dialogue back and forth. But it's really a mix of hip hop, Japanese folk music, not even Japanese pop, folk music, and then jazz. So it's this really wild song. And that's where like the conversational dialogue, it's like I recorded my part, both my parts, and then I got Tony doing his part. I put it in between it with the beat, and then I added a little saxophone to the end to round it off. And it's sort of like the idea of going to Japan, and yeah, the Yakuza is there, but it's still the wonderful place you want to go. And it's like if you go to Japan and you're looking for trouble and you want to mess with the Yakuza, then that's exactly the vibe you would get, right? Which ties into a lot of the other ideas of the album and what's to come as well. So that became Welcome to Japan. The next track was Psychogenic Fugue, which was inspired from the idea of David Lynch's movie Lost Highway. The idea of you basically can't handle accepting your current reality, so you convince yourself that things aren't actually as they appear, that like you basically lose your sanity, you black out, you're no longer in control of what's actually happening because the real you is unaware of what's happening. You have no memory of what's actually happening because you've sort of lost your mind, like a psychogenic fugue, like what OJ did during the trial. Basically, they say like he was suffering a psychogenic fugue. Whether that's true or not, they used that idea in Lost Highway with Bill Pullman's character, and I liked the idea of that. It was fascinating. So I was like, yeah, psychogenic fugue. And then I had this really crazy idea because of like the COVID going on, and I had this really dark kind of reggae summertime sounding beat, and I was like, oh, I should play some like tenor sax as the solo at the end, like Bill Pullman's character. He played sax in that, right? The tenor. So I was like, okay, sort of put myself in that character. And I was talking about like in isolation, like being stuck inside all the time because of COVID. You can't go anywhere. And that's how it was, right? And I was watching Virus Fukasu no He. So all these ideas sort of embodied itself and became psychogenic fugue. Now, what's cool is I reference Lost Highway. I reference Jazz and Virus Fukasu no He and Twin Peaks and all these things. The chorus, I actually did my main vocals, and then the backing vocals of the chorus, I did with all my alter egos, like doing different voices in the background of it, because it gives you that sound of multiple voices singing the same chorus. Like there's multiple different entities or personalities within the same person. One person is seeing it from four different ways, and he's saying it from four different perspectives. And that's why it ends with the tenor sax, which I did. Daybreak, of course, he ended up doing the mixing and the mastering for that one, Tone Jones instrumental. And I did the video of that right in my backyard, and I had this massive jazz collection, so I was kind of just showcasing that off. I wore the COVID mask. It was a pretty cool music video overall at the time. Like, I'm very proud with how that one turned out as well. And then that really builds the idea of, okay, anything could happen moving forward with this album. Like anything could happen. And then it leads into the next track with Haruka Tanaka, or Haruka Mate, as we called her on the album. One of my friends I did karaoke with, she's actually sending me a calendar of Hitomi Shimatani and a t-shirt. So, domo arigato. Very much appreciate that. And it's very cool because she did the outro, because I said, I want you to say this dialogue. I basically wrote out what I wanted in English. And I was like, say that in the most logical and sensible way in Japanese. Like, that'll be your outro. Because I got to get you on this record too. We've done karaoke together. You're a singer. You perform at these places in Japan sometimes. Need to get you on a record. Like, you know, even if I can't get you to the studio here, I can at least put you saying some dialogue at the end of the movie, and then you could say, hey, I'm on a professional song. So, very close friend of mine, still a dear friend of mine too. So that was the idea of putting her at the outro. The intro is actually a sample of David Lynch in Twin Peaks when he's looking at the bonsai tree, which he's mistakenly calling a bonsai tree. A lot of foreigners make that mistake. It's not a bonsai tree, it's bonsai. Now, it's funny because when you say bonsai in Japanese, it's actually way different. Like, that's why he relates that. He's like, remember those old World War II movies? Bonsai. Because when they're saying that, they're charging it. Like, hurrah, yeah. Like, that's what it is. It's like a cheer. Like, charging into battle. Hurrah. Like, bonsai. That's what it actually is, right? So, but a lot of foreigners get that misconception and think that the little miniature trees are called bonsai. It's bonsai. So that was the idea behind that. And then my verses were the ideas of mistakes that foreigners make, the Yakuza giving like this different sort of identity to Japanese culture than how it really is. And that's why there's the chorus, which I basically did in Ryukyuan, which is the native language of Okinawa, because Okinawa actually used to be its own country. After it was occupied by the Americans in World War II, it was given to the Japanese, which actually pissed off the local Okinawan people because they were like, hey, wait a second, we were our own country, we weren't even part of Japan. Why the hell do? And they just kind of got given to them, right? Basically, when America surrendered their occupation, it was just given to them, and it was like, hey, we were our own country first, right? So they have their own sort of dialect, and it's a lot different than regular Japanese. It has some similarities, but very different. In fact, when I was singing the chorus, Jiui, Teiui, Sayasa, Haya, like, I'll put it this way. My ex Haruna's like, oh, that's Okinawan sort of folk song. Like, Okinawan folk language. That's not even regular Japanese. And she explained that to me. And she's like, where'd you hear that? And I said, oh, I heard it in a Ryuichi Sakamoto song. And she's like, oh, well, he's Okinawan. And I was like, oh, okay, that's why. So it's Ryukyuan. But it's very cool because they use that in one of the scenes of Black Rain with like the Yakuza boss coming into the club. So that's what it kind of reminded me of. It was the ideas of these things that tied everything together to make Bonsai. And it's a very like hype, upbeat sort of party song that blends like Japanese with like American culture and then Ryukyuan culture, which is the Okinawan folk culture. And it's a very unique mix in that sense, and it's very cool. So I was really excited and happy with how that song turned out, and it was very unique. Now, the next song, I actually had the instrumentation done by Tone Jones, but I did the mixing and the mastering myself. And I played sax on it. I did the rapping. My voice is very dry today, people. I apologize for that. But I will try to get through this since we only have 3 more songs to discuss anyway, including this one. So the next track, 16, was a song called Chose Me, which I originally wanted to call Tomomi. It was for this woman I liked who had actually like lived in America for a while, studied English very well, and she had similar disorders that I was diagnosed with at the time. I apologize for the yelling in the background. I don't like when that happens, but I have no control over that, so please forgive me for that. Watashi o yorushite. And yeah, sorry, that totally threw off my train of thought. But as I was saying with the song, I'll wait for him to stop since he's interrupting a live broadcast. I'm sorry, people. I'm really sorry. He likes to yell, and it's like the more he yells, the more he attracts things to yell about. Like, that's the law of attraction right there in effect, and a not so positive, productive result you would want. Okay, since I keep losing my train of thought, let's just start over. Okay, so if he'll shut up, that is, since I'm literally in the middle of a live broadcast and you insist on yelling. Watashi o yorushite gomen nasai. Sorry, people. He just loves to yell at the dogs. Like, and they just do more bad stuff that make him yell. So he's just attracting more of that. Anyways, what I was trying to say before I got interrupted all those times was the track 16 was my own mixing and mastering. And I played sax on it, and I wrote the lyrics for this girl who had very similar disorders named Tomomi. And I liked her a lot. Actually, this was after me and Haruna broke up, and I really thought like she liked me too. Like, she would talk to me. We seemed really close. We shared ideas with each other. We talked a lot of the time about many different things, and I even helped get her into jazz, right? So I wanted to make this song, but she felt embarrassed if I called the song Tomomi. So I ended up calling it Chose Me because it's referenced in the lyrics of the chorus, and it is like similar to what I wanted to call the song anyway. But the idea of that came from the idea of like jazz songs, like when I think it was inspired by a Louis Armstrong song, because the idea was like if you made a song after a girl, like that girl was very special. Dinah, that's what it was. And it's funny because Louis Armstrong did do Dinah, but it was actually Fats Waller who composed it and came up with it originally. I was really getting into Fats Waller at the time too. So yeah, I was trying to remember, especially because I got thrown off there for a bit. I'm like, it was Dinah. Dinah, hearing it from Fats Waller and Louis Armstrong, that inspired the idea of wanting to call it Tomomi. Now, she was embarrassed and shy about it, and we didn't end up getting together. She ended up being really cold towards me and didn't even really seem to appreciate that I put all that heartfelt emotion into making the song, which is why we no longer talk to each other. She really seemed cold and bitter towards me. In fact, I felt like she led me on. Like, she liked the attention because nobody else was giving it to her, but she didn't really want to give the same attention back, so to speak. But either way, it was a nice song. It had a very jazzy quality, especially because I was getting more into jazz. Like, that was the idea of the chorus, rhyming everything with Tomomi, and then the verses, rapping like sort of the story, the feelings I had for her at the time, and then rounding it off with the saxophone, because that was around the time I was also just getting into the saxophone. I was actually attending an online jazz class at the time, so it was very exciting to do that too. And then, of course, after that song, it leads into SOS, which was a really phenomenal song. This was one of the few beats I actually had since back when I first was starting to make Nail Gun, finally getting used on the record. And it was mixed by D-Mac, mastered by myself, and it featured samples of the Japanese dialogue of the Simpsons episode for Steamed Hams in the beginning, but talking about the Northern Lights because it was like shining bright like up north in Canada, the Northern Lights, right? And then in Japanese, almost like an anime. And then Haruna, my ex, she was still my girlfriend at the time. She had recorded this a long time ago, but it just didn't make it to the light of day until then. And then she ended up doing the dialogue where she's basically explaining that the name of the group is the SOS Brigade. And that like starts off the song because the song is called SOS, which is the acronym for Sharing Our Sound. It is a reference to the melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, but my own spin on it is our SOS means sharing our sound. So Olga does the chorus and the bridge. She sings it. I do the first verse, and I'm rapping that typical mad, lyrical, laid-back, upbeat style of Super Kami Guru Alucard. There's a vibraphone in the background, which was done by Smoke Signal Productions, who did a lot of work on Mahjong Titan especially, and a bit on Nail Gun. And the second verse is Reiko rapping in a mix of English and Japanese, basically playing like the other character of the SOS Brigade. Like, you would look at it as Haruna was Haruhi, I was Kyon, Reiko was Mikuru, Olga was Nagato or Yuki, and Rain, her husband, does the third verse. He was sort of like Itsuki Koizumi. And we all played our characters in different ways, like our different approaches. He was like the Esper. Reiko was like the time traveler. Olga, because she was Chinese, she was different, sort of way out of the atmosphere. She was like the alien, and then Haruda's like the wild, upbeat, energetic one, like really starting the song off. I come in as Kyon, sort of laying out the groundwork as like the main narrator of it. And then, yeah, the song was very beautiful because it had all this mix of colorful characters and designs to the beat and the atmosphere. And the subject matter was like sort of sharing the sound all around the world, like the SOS Brigade, in many different ways, and talking about all the things going on in the world. And then it ends with an outro from Hitomi, a beautiful part to add to the end of the song. So I really liked that too, because that was her first appearance on a record. So, Aishiteru Hitomi-chan, itsumo. And she says it in English, which was totomo kawaii. And then it leads into the final track, Final Requiem, named after the album, where Reiko did the flute solo at the end. And then I recorded an outro where I quoted a poem by John Merrick, the Elephant Man. And you see all this reference in the video where I took a lot of ideas of kendo fighting and From Dusk Till Dawn and all these different elements of things. I also talk about like the issues with Grace, who appeared on the original version of All I Want, and sort of explaining the backstory of that. I also explained how there was this girl named Emily that things didn't work out with, and she kind of was rude and dry to me and all this other stuff. So I was like talking about the summary of a lot of different things, like basically summarizing the whole story of everything in my life and everything in my albums up to the final point. And like I said when I first started the beginning of this presentation too, final moratorium is referenced, especially near the end of my lyrics and verses before the flute solo and the main chorusy like hook of the song. Uh, Super Saiyan Namekian, drinking my final requiem. Before that, there's final moratorium. I actually quote Chihara Minori's lyrics because she was a very big influence around this time when I was doing this. And I was so motivated and inspired by that. And originally, I was actually going to have a line where I confessed that I still kind of loved Grace in a way, but because she had cut me off and she was so cold and dry, I didn't want to say it anymore. So I removed that line and ended up using the line quoting Chihara Minori instead. And then, yeah, Reiko basically, she had a friend or she used a keyboard something, but she got this like fluty solo. Like it sounded like old traditional Japanese like flute music, like takuhachi flutes. And it sounded really beautiful. And she put that to kind of add the atmosphere of the end of the record. And with the Elephant Man, like sort of poem to tie it all together, it's like, don't be ashamed of who you are. Things could always be worse, but don't ever look at anything that you are, good or bad, your flaws as a bad thing. You are who you are because who you are internally in your mind, too, defines who you are as a character, as a person in this world. The mind is the real standard and the measure of a man. So it was very beautiful. In fact, oddly enough, D-Mac, who did the mixing, I did the mastering with this one too. He watched The Elephant Man because I lent it to him. And he didn't watch it until right after he completed this track. And he said, you know, I understand why you use that poem. And watching The Elephant Man, I hadn't seen it in years, but to rewatch it, I watched it right after completing all this. Everything kind of had this feeling of completion. Like there was this feeling of satisfaction. And I really got more into the movie than I ever did the first time I watched it. Like I really understood, and I understood why you were inspired so much by David Lynch and this movie and all the things. And he's like, everything with these records that we made together, as sad as it was that our partnership would come to an end after this, he's like, you know, it was really a good time for me making all these records with you. And I learned a lot from you. And I could honestly say, you know, I don't really like rap, but I love your music. And I think it's really great. And you got to keep going with this. Don't give up no matter what. And you got something special because it's something that I don't really care for with a lot of other artists, but I love your music because you're very calm, you're honest, and you present something that really makes it interesting with every track. It's always unique. It's like I never really know what to expect. And I'll sit there after sometimes and I'll think, oh, that was so deep. That was so profound. So yeah, it was sad that our partnership came to an end. But as we kind of reflected on like the journey from Nail Gun, me and D-Mac working together all the way to the end of Final Requiem, we both kind of agreed, you know, it was really good while it lasted. And we definitely made some of the best music in my whole music career so far during that era. So yeah, it was just kind of a beautiful feeling of completion and coming full circle. And I would say making that record, it was very there were a lot of dark times. I would say that was, other than Impulse, that was the most emotionally driving roller coaster sort of moment of all my records, because there was a lot and things really went hard on me from then on. But then, you know, good things happened too. I would go on to start the jazz quartet, the SOS Brigade Quartet, with my neighbors and some help from Smoke Signal Productions and one of the producers and counselors I worked with at the hospital. And we would create that album, and then we would lead into more solo albums, which I did all myself. So a lot of things still will come. Like there will be more episodes of album discussions because we've only got through the first 4 solo albums. So I hope you all have enjoyed hearing like the story of Final Requiem, and just know that that was the end of that sort of part of my journey. It was the end of my relationship with Haruna. It was the end of my relationship working with DMAC, and there were some sad things about that. But looking back, I'm really grateful for the experience of that album because it really helped me grow as an artist and as an individual. And good and bad, I'm grateful for all the times making that record. So I hope everybody will check out the songs on YouTube, look it up, Final Requiem, and in the description below, please help support. As always, I make this appeal because artists who aren't backed by management and major record labels and promoters and marketers, we struggled to get the necessary means and funding to keep making the music. So, especially because I want to keep making good music, I'm sure if people listen to it, they all agree, and they always do, that it's fantastic music. So, help support the artists, help me keep making that great music as we've discussed in all these videos. And we will come back tomorrow, as usual, discuss the next record, which will basically, we're going to do all the solo records first, and then I will start talking about the band albums, and we'll go from there. So, yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this presentation. Check out the descriptions, too, if you do check it out on YouTube, Final Requiem or Impulse, Nail Gun, and Mahjong Titan, and you do want to buy them, you can buy them from iTunes, Apple Music, Spotify. They're available on all these things. So, definitely help support the artist so we can keep making good music. So, thank you everybody for watching. Until next time, arigato gozaimasu minasan. Sayonara, matane. Super Kami Guru Alucard. Peace out.